So, welcome to this Sunday's episode of Talks Within the Nine-Sided Circle with your hosts, Mushtaq Ali Al-Ansari and
Noor Kyle.
Yep. Before we get started, if you are watching this on YouTube after the fact, welcome. Do be sure to hit the like button if you like us. Hit the dislike button if you don't like us. There's no such thing as bad press. So. Whichever way you'd like to go, feel free. And also, definitely feel free to subscribe to the channel and hit that stupid little bell down there that tells you to get notifications from us, because we're always putting strange stuff up, and we would love for you to know about it.
Yeah, to share it with you.
Yeah. So tonight, the subject of the talk is inwardness. What is inwardness? Anybody care to hazard before I start pontificating? Some cat somewhere is having too much fun. All right, so I think it was Rumi who said something like, inside everyone, there is a quiet place, which is obviously has nothing to do with dogs. A quiet place that he described it as the place that can allow you to really touch the other. Excuse me for a moment. Dog, out of here. No. Go on. Go. The dog has a crush on Kyle.
Yeah, so
every time she comes to visit and work with me, the dog is always like, "Oh, don't work, just pay attention to me. You should be petting me now."
It kind of works.
It kind of works.
Right.
So, inwardness. There are two things that happen here. One is it is essential for you to be in touch with your own inwardness and awake to it.
Well, do you want to share what Rumi thought of as...
Oh, didn't we not finish that? No, there was a dog involved. Sorry.
Yeah.
There is nothing in my dog but God. So, Rumi suggested that this silent place inside yourself, which is the inwardness, is what touches the other and also touches the divine. And so in order to do that, you have to find that place within yourself. Now, how does this manifest? Inwardness is involved with empathy. The act of empathy is the act of perceiving the inwardness of the other. And without the ability to do that, you are not quite human. If you look at the evolution of human beings, from birth to adulthood, you have children. Children do not have much empathy to start with. As a matter of fact, a famous psychologist once suggested that children were just little sociopaths. And in my experience, this is by and large true to start. And this is okay. This is how it's supposed to be. But what happens is, as a child develops, they learn to perceive the inwardness of the other, or they don't. And if they do, they have a chance to become a real human being. And if they don't, they become Donald Trump. Did I say that out loud? I'm sorry.
Not that you're wrong. But...
Yeah, I'm trying to be apolitical. It's hard sometimes. So, The trouble is that you can do a mechanical simulation of empathy, right? You can mechanically be nice to people. You can mechanically appear as if you care about how another person feels. But this is not real empathy, and it is not perceiving the inwardness of the other. And it's not perceiving your own inwardness. So first, let's look at our own. Are you real? First question. Check inside. Are you real? Is there anybody in there? Do you perceive yourself? Do you notice that you have a history? Even more importantly, do you notice that you have a fate and a destiny? Do you notice that you feel? Do you notice that you think? Do you notice that you are alive? This is how you begin to perceive your own inwardness. And it seems like silly questions, except when was the last time you actually stopped to check on all of this stuff? We take it for granted. And before you can begin to perceive the inwardness of the other, you have to be able to perceive your own. You have to be able to see yourself as subject. So, talk to me about that. What do you think? Does that make sense? Am I just like running off at my mouth and there is no sense to any of this so far?
Aaron says makes sense. Nancy says it makes sense.
Okay.
And if anyone wants to unmute and share thoughts, that's
yeah,
always cool
that's
too.
even better.
Yeah.
Why does it make sense? Such a quiet crowd tonight. I got to warn you. Remember, I used to teach school, so I know how to call on people when I have to.
Well, Nancy says, how could you value people without knowing what a person is?
Yes. And what teaches you what a person is? Since today is today, I will tell you one of the things. You know what it is today, at least here in America?
She says,
observing the handiest person. The Prophet Muhammad said, heaven is found at the feet of your mother. Think about that. Heaven is found at the feet of your mother, or paradise is found at the feet of your mother, is probably a better translation. In regular human beings, your mother is the first person that you connect with, and it is the first person that you begin to perceive as their own inwardness. Can any of you remember the first time you realized that your mother had feelings, assuming that you had a decent mother? Think about that. The first time that you realized your mother had feelings.
For me, it was realizing she had like a childhood of her own. And she had gone through the same phases that I had gone through. And that was very much a humanizing moment.
Yeah. For me, it was when I found one of my mother's old journals from when she was probably in her late teens or early 20s.
Yeah.
And it was filled with actually really good poetry.
Really?
Yeah. And I was young enough that I didn't understand it all. But it was like, wow, Mom.
Yeah.
So in most cases, assuming that your mother is not insane, which does happen from time to time, your mother is the first person whose feelings you get in touch with besides your own. And that gives you the practice for being in touch with every other person in the world. So right now, we have 7 people live in 1, 2, 3 different countries, and spanning the entirety of the United States. So about 3,000 miles across the country from West Coast to East Coast. And we're all people. How do we know that? Can you feel that? So we have a new person here. You've all noticed. Would you introduce yourself? Yes, you. You're the new kid on the block. So go ahead and take your mic off if you'd like, and tell everybody who you are. Or you can type, or
There you
can,
go.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, hello. My name is Mustaqim. I'm from Indonesia, and currently I live in Bogor, West Java, close to Jakarta.
Yep.
And actually it's 9 a.m. in the morning here, and just happy to be in this group.
Happy.
The first time.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's very exciting for me because Indonesia is, as some of you know, a place that's very close to my heart. And I've spent a fair bit of time there and spent a lot of time in Bogor, which is a beautiful city. So it's great fun having you here.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you.
So here's a person from a different place, a different country, a different culture, who speaks a different language, or 2 or 3. Obviously, English, Bahasa Indonesia. Do you also speak Bahasa Sunda?
No. Actually, I grew up in Sulawesi.
Ah, okay.
Yes. I moved to Bogor when I was my first job here.
So now we know even more about you. So Rumi would look at Mustaqim as like a marvel, like an entire universe sitting in front of him. Because he was that kind of guy. He would look at all of us that way. He would see our pasts, our futures, our destinies, our feelings, our thoughts, all existing in this moment. He would perceive each of us as an inwardness. And if you do that, certain things happen. One is that it's much, much harder to be an asshole to everybody else. if you perceive them as their inwardness. It's hard to treat people badly. And it is one of the things that allows a human being to become an adult. If you cannot perceive the inwardness of another at will, you are not an adult human being. I will say that across the board.
So what would be an example of not perceiving or struggling to perceive?
Every racist does not perceive the other as a human being. Anytime you generalize an entire class of people by one trait or one small set of traits, you are not seeing the other. So generalization by quality is a way of blocking out the other. And instead, you live it with internal stories about who these people are.
How about if someone pisses you off and then you assume about them, they did it on purpose,
yeah,
they're a terrible person,
yep,
with bad intentions, etc., etc.,
etc., etc. And you other them, as we say. You make them an object. I mean, it fits in the language when you say, that person is the object of my anger. Or that person is the object of my desire. It goes both ways. When you are in your larval stage as a human being, you are not actually capable of love. You are only capable of desiring objects.
So here's a question from Nancy.
Okay.
Nancy asks, can such people, meaning people who probably don't have a across-the-board perfect sense of others' inwardness, can such people perceive the inwardness of some people?
Probably. But it's probably less frequent than we would like. See, this is the thing. The outward behavior of somebody who can mimic real empathy and somebody who experiences real empathy can look the same, but the internal state is totally different. It is the difference between a mechanical set of behaviors that you act out versus true expression. So, think of a social situation. Kyle and I meet at a party, and yay, and I shake her hand and I go, yeah, I'm very happy to meet you. And I look at her eyes and I smile, I show my teeth at her in a friendly way as opposed to an unfriendly way. And I do all of these things, and they're all social cues to say that I am a friendly person, I am seeing you and all of this, but it's all bullshit. It's just patterns that I'm running that allow me to appear to be a particular kind of person. And I may either be thinking about something totally different or running stories in my head.
I think we've all encountered that at some point.
Yes, and we've probably all done it at some point.
I'm thinking of myself and having done it. Absolutely. Yeah.
Any of the guys here, all you have to do is remember when you were a teenager. I guarantee you that you've done this. Now, here's the difference. When you are doing that, there is noise in your head.
Aaron says, sycophancy versus sincerity.
Yes. That is a well-turned phrase. I'm probably going to steal that from you. Theft.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's right. We'll quote you.
Oh, yeah.
We'll attribute that quote. All right. Anyway, so
When you are running those kinds of patterns, there is always noise in your head of one form or another. You are either lost in the past, you are lost in the future, you are distracted. It's just an envelope. You can write all over it. If you are present to the other person's inwardness, there's a silence inside of you. And this gets back to what Rumi was talking about. Because you cannot perceive the other amongst all the noise. You have to quiet down. And there is a qualitative difference in the experience of somebody doing this that is quite genuine and quite unique, and oftentimes scares people because they aren't used to it. They're used to the mechanical social signaling that people do.
Or sometimes you can notice it when someone gives you a hug. You know, it's like, oh, great to see you, pat, side hug, whatever. And then there's someone who really embraces you and is someone who feels good to hug and feels like they're present with you, that kind of thing.
So before I go on, any thoughts? Is this still making sense?
Okay, so to follow up on Nancy's question and your answers, that would suggest then that it's not a matter of you're an adult or you're a child. Rather, it's a matter that with some people you experience a sympathetic relationship, and with others you may not. So
no, it's a matter of, are you an adult or are you a child?
So say again, sorry.
I said, yes, it is a matter of, are you an adult or are you a child?
In that moment with that person or in general?
In general.
Okay, so that explain enough for that, given that, explain what you mean by saying that sometimes with some people you can have this genuine empathetic relationship and with others not.
If you do, and you are not an actual human adult, it is accidental and you do not have the ability to replicate it. You could say that it happens through mechanical actions and it just pops up for a moment and then it's gone. Or there might be drugs involved. You laugh, but there is that. There are certain phenethylamines that if you take them under the right circumstances will give you the experience of the other as subject and completely change your life, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. So that would be an example of it happening accidentally. I'm saying that a human adult can experiences the other in the people around them pretty much at all times.
So that's to clarify, without touching, without necessarily being their friend, without necessarily having a relationship with them even. You're just perceiving them as universes in their own right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, but then let's go back into Kyle's example, of the person who pisses you off. Here you are, Mustafa, walking along the streets of Oakland, whatever the hell, empathizing with everybody, but someone pisses you off or maybe you don't get pissed off anymore. Maybe Kyle gets pissed off.
Oh, I get pissed off. I'm really good at being pissed off.
So what's happening in that case? Are you stopped being human? Are you no longer?
I can be pissed off and still perceive somebody as inwardness. Still perceive somebody.
I thought that Kyle's example was of a case where you lost that inwardness perception, just simply reacted to them as...
You could, if you went into mechanical behavior over it, but you don't have to.
I think that's more what I intended to say, so I'm sorry if that was confusing.
Right.
I can see somebody's inwardness and dislike their behavior. You don't have to like somebody's behavior because you see them as subject.
Right. So you're saying that once you see anybody as a subject, you see everybody as a subject? Is that basically?
No, I'm not saying that.
All right.
Didn't say that. Did not even remotely hint at that.
Okay.
I said that a fully adult human being will have the ability to perceive everyone they meet, even bad people, as subject.
Okay.
And I've tested this out because I used to work in psychiatric hospitals. You know, I have met some people that were trying, that were very, very trying when you were attempting to perceive them as an inwardness, as subject. And admittedly, I was much younger. I could probably do it better now, but fully adult human beings are capable of, and habitually is the wrong word, intentionally perceive the other as inwardness.
So intentionality.
Yeah, intentionality is there. And that does not mean that you have to like what that particular inwardness is doing. If I'm walking down the streets of Oakland and I find somebody who's like beating the crap out of some woman, that perceiving their inwardness, understanding that they were an abused child perhaps, or any of this stuff, is not going to stop me from bapping them over the head with whatever I can find that's heavy and blunt. But it might stop me from intentionally killing them.
Nancy has a question.
Yes.
That's sort of relevant. Does perceiving inwardness make dislike less obsessive?
Yes.
Not obsessive at all, she adds?
I would say frequently, not obsessive at all. To the degree that you've worked on yourself, and I'm hypothesizing on this because I have not completely cleaned my own nafs yet. But I find that, yes, it allows you to let go of things very, very quickly. And to understand that either the person who has done something that has pissed you off is acting as a robot, that they're doing it out of patterns, or at least being able to see the greater picture of them. Because usually if you're pissed off at somebody, that's all you see.
I think that's what I was trying to get at, yeah. So I'm glad we were able to kind of dig into that, because I guess I was not as clear as I could have been.
Well, we aren't. We never are. That's why we're doing this way, so we can have questions asked and clarify.
Yep. So thank you, Omar.
Yes. This is one of those places where Kyle and I both admit that we are not perfect. We do not have all of the answers. I don't even have all of the questions yet.
We need help in that department too.
Yes.
Okay, well, let me push one more, and then I'll give up on this one. But
go for it.
The example that was brought up of an, I guess, inauthentic relationship, one that was not perceiving the inwardness of another person, was this social nicety of getting to know somebody, right? You know, oh, hi, how are you? I'll show my teeth, I'll smile, etc., etc. Okay. Now, are you saying that once someone is able to perceive the inwardness of a person, they never engage in that kind of social facade manipulation anymore?
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay, so I'm missing something about the logic.
I know.
Yeah.
Yes. So let's say here I am, and I have just met Kyle at a party.
Yep.
And the first thing that I do is I perceive her inwardness. I look at her, and it's like an infinite regress inside of her. The entire universe is looking at me through her eyes. And I could be completely overwhelmed by that, or I could intentionally go through the social signals to show that I am a nice person and safe, and find her to be pleasing to speak with, because the social signals exist for a reason. But if I do that, I'm doing that intentionally, on purpose, as a form of communication, just like I use words. Because I found that if you communicate with somebody directly through telepathy, it scares the crap out of them, and they usually want to run away. So instead, we do, hi.
Oh, hey.
Yeah, it's really nice to meet you.
It's been cool.
Yeah. But I am present to it and do not have any agendas with it, as opposed to somebody who is doing it mechanically.
Who might be trying to network at the party in a very like superficial, checking off the boxes kind of way, let's say.
So if I speak in English, no matter what my state, the words are formed the same way. Unless I'm in a poetic reverie, and then the words are formed kind of strangely sometimes, but that's a different story.
Does that make any sense, Omar?
It makes sense. It doesn't fully meet the question, but it makes sense what you're saying. You know, the reason it doesn't fully meet the question, of course, is that that person whom you were just describing, who just goes around socially making new contacts, etc., might still be able to empathize with his child at home. So it's not like they don't have that.
Are they empathizing with their child,
well, okay.
or are they going through?
And I guess I would submit that a lot of times they are, and it's almost like
no.
Well, okay, I don't know, obviously. Well,
right. So we're hypothesizing.
What?
So we're hypothesizing.
Right. And
my feeling, most of the cases like that, they are going through the mechanical steps that appear as if they were empathizing, as opposed to actually empathizing. I base this statement on a fair amount of observation and questioning of a lot of people over a lot of years. Mm. And that it will look outwardly the same, but inwardly will be different.
Maybe it's obviously an empirical question, and I have not conducted any great surveys of this, but
it would be worth your time maybe to do that.
Maybe. Yeah.
Or not. So you can have, like I said, outwardly the appearance of the same behavior, and inwardly two completely different states that it's coming from. Now, I will also hypothesize that if it is a woman who is going home to her child, there is a greater likelihood of true empathy. Incrementally.
Incrementally?
Incrementally more empathetic than, say, the kid's father.
So there are degrees of this empathy?
There could be. I would measure it in duration.
Okay, I'm gonna shut up at this point. I mean, it's I suspect a much larger topic than is available at the moment, but once you admit degrees of empathy, then
I am talking about degrees of duration of awakeness. Okay. Not degrees of empathy, degrees of duration of awakeness. It's the same thing. It's like you're either awake or you're not. There are no degrees to awakeness. It's like saying that, you only have 3 degrees of pregnancy, right? There is no such thing as a little bit pregnant. There is no such thing as a little bit awake. If you are awake now, you have the exact same awakeness as every awakened being in the entire history of humanity. And during the time that you're awake, you have the ability to perceive truly the inwardness of another person. At all other times, you are not perceiving the inwardness of another person. You are perceiving the objects that are given to your consciousness, which is different.
Okay, so the adulthood is a passing phase, possibly. You could be adult at one time and still a child another time in your definition of adult and child?
I don't think so. I think that true human adulthood is like true physical adulthood. You know, you don't go back to being a child. You become an adult.
So I think we've said this before. You can be adult without being awake all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can be adult without being awake all the time.
Okay.
There's a difference between human adulthood and abiding non-dual awareness, or whatever you want to call it.
Okay.
But one of the things that is an earmark of human adulthood is the ability to literally perceive the other as inwardness. And if you can't do that, you ain't adult. If you can do that, and that is your default state, then you are adult.
Mm-hmm.
So Aaron asks, adults can also behave as children?
To the degree that they are still expressing mechanical nature, sure.
Nancy asks, does perceiving inwardness give you details about them?
No, not necessarily.
So it's not mind reading.
No, it's not mind reading.
Yeah.
It is literally empathy, feeling with somebody else.
Well, empathy can be a confusing word too, actually.
Yeah, I know. Empathy is, sadly, we are stuck with the English language, which is not rich in the kind of words we need.
So it's not being an empath in the sense of like reading feelings and minds in the, you know, that kind of way.
No, it's not that.
Mustaqim asks, parents' love to their child is perceiving the child's inwardness?
Oftentimes, yes. And this is why I say that the mother is so important, because women have a bit more capacity for this. It's kind of hardwired in. If it wasn't, most women would probably strangle their offspring at birth, because little human beings can be really obnoxious. So it takes a little bit longer for the father to develop this, in my experience, though in most cases it does happen. But I have told you guys before that when it comes to human adulthood, women have a leg up. And probably 2 legs up. And part of that is because they are required to bear the next generation. And if they don't take care of the baby does not survive. So the ability to move from a little girl into an adult woman is a little bit more hardwired in. Guys, not so much. And you see that, well, in cultures where there are separations between the sexes, where little boys and little girls don't get to interact and they don't get to grow up together, you see a much more, a greater prevalence of adolescent behavior carried into adulthood. Among cultures where there is a lot of separation between the genders.
Oh, you mean in, yeah, okay.
Yeah. I'm thinking specifically of Saudi Arabia, which is where I've seen it the worst of anywhere. And my theory is that it is very difficult for men to mature if they are not interacting with women. women seem to catalyze us. And we could get into, gender stuff about, gay men and lesbian women and all of that, but that's irrelevant to the point here, because we aren't talking specifically about sexuality. But I find this, in my experience, to be more true than not.
Nancy says, I think I believe in inwardness, but it's a philosophical belief, not exactly an experience.
Yep, got to go for the experience. But a philosophical belief is a great place to start. It means at least you know to look for it.
And you probably have experienced it, probably just didn't realize that's what you were doing.
Yeah, I realized it's a good place to start. I hadn't realized it was an issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about somebody who's annoying online. He does superiority dances about knowing more than other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I realized I could calm down to some extent by realizing that he probably thinks his behavior is normal because he grew up with it, with parents who behave like that.
Or it is possible that he came from such a damaging past that he is overcompensating for his own self-loathing.
Mm-hmm.
And if that were the case, then you could begin to develop a little compassion for the poor guy.
Well, yeah, either way.
Yeah. I mean, you might still want to beat him over the head with a blunt object from time to time, but
Mm-hmm.
you would at least do that consciously.
Yeah. Well, he's working on it. I probably need to tell him that I've noticed he's working on it.
Yeah.
That might be awesome, actually, if you think it'll be received in a way that feels healthy for you and for them.
It's a crapshoot as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter if they know. What matters is that you perceive them that way, because that will alter your behavior.
Yeah, that's true.
Think about that. How does your behavior alter when you actually perceive the other as an inwardness, when you perceive them as subject rather than object? You all understand what I mean by that, right?
Not sure.
Yes, Nancy says she's not sure, so maybe we should touch on that.
So the computer that you are looking at right now is an object. It's a thing. It has no inwardness, even though we might like to think that it does from time to time, especially when it messes up. But it doesn't. The people who you are looking at here are not things. That's the difference. Human beings are not things. We have consciousness that makes us subject rather than object. A dog is not a thing either, but we're talking about people right now. So we are all creatures of thought and feeling and perception. We all have histories. We carry joy and pain with us. We have aspirations and hopes. We struggle. We do all of these things. And that makes us not an object. We have our own subjectivity. And when we perceive each other as having our own subjectivity, we stop looking at each other as object. And that is the permeable membrane between childhood and adulthood. That's one of them. And it's a very important one.
Does that help, Nancy?
Yeah.
Awesome.
More thoughts? Come on, guys, speak up, because otherwise I am going to prod Ilmar and he and I can debate this and you all will have to listen.
Oh, right, something about mothers. Because my impression is that a fair number of women have some aware of the inwardness of their babies. But as the kid becomes more independent, the mother may not sustain that.
Yeah, possibly. And I also have noticed that in more recent times, less and less women are perceiving the inwardness of their babies, which I find incredibly disturbing. But it is nevertheless, like I said, women have a leg up because of that.
Do you have any idea what's going on with women being less perceptive about their babies?
I think it's the same reason that we're producing more sociopaths and psychopaths in our society in general.
Do you want to say a bit about that?
Yeah. My experience is that for the last 75 years, we have been selecting for the psychopathic personality as the most successful kind of personality to survive in the culture that we've created. If you want to live in the modern Western world, you're better off as a psychopath. Seriously. You're better off without the ability to perceive the other as inwardness, because then you can be ridiculously successful and pass on your genetic material. This is pure Darwinism. But I will guarantee you that if we were to take the CEOs of all of the Fortune 500 companies and the national level politicians of every government in the world and test them psychologically, we would be horrified at the number of them who would test on the spectrum of narcissist, sociopath, psychopath, what we now call antisocial personality disorder. And this is not a new idea. Wilhelm Reich observed this back in the 1940s. You know, he basically said that flat out. He said, if we were to psychologically evaluate our politicians, we would be horrified at what we saw.
Alternate theory about mothers is they're subject to so much advice that's probably too much noise in their heads.
Could be. I have not been spending that much time with women and children of late, so my data is probably old.
In regard to Reich, Dave said, and look where that got him.
Yes, exactly. You all know about Wilhelm Reich, right? Student of Sigmund Freud. One of the three. There was Reich, there was Adler, and there was Jung, who were the three big students of Sigmund Freud who went on to found their own psychological schools. Now, Adler focused on power, Jung focused on collective unconscious, and Reich focused on sexuality. He took Freud seriously. Reich was persecuted to death in America. Our government took his books and burned them in an incinerator in New York City. People don't realize that. And this is not, 400 years ago. This was in the 1950s. This was like in my lifetime. So, yeah, Reich was, his people who study him now, that it's safe to study him, realize that he was genius level thinker who was onto some really important stuff, and sometimes didn't have the most elegant way of expressing it, but he terrified people, so they suppressed him.
Aaron says, Philip K. seemed to try to describe this distinction using people and androids and electric sheep.
Yep.
So Philip K. Dick.
Yeah. Yep. And I think that you're exactly right in that. And it also opened up the question, when androids start to perceive their own inwardness and the inwardness of each other, what's the difference between them and us? Other thoughts? Show of hands. Am I crazy?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. We have 2, 3. Yilmar wants to put his hand up.
This will I figure out. Me, teacher, me. I don't want to interrupt if there are other questions.
Dude, interrupt. That's why we pay you the big bucks.
Yeah, thanks. My bank account is exploding, obviously. No, okay. So let's take a little more deeper look at this inwardness thing. I mean, it seems to me there are really 2 rather different interpretations possible. Maybe both of these are true. On the one hand, what is it that I'm perceiving about you when I perceive your inwardness? On one road, I perceive your subjective life, or part of it. You know, your desires, your thoughts, your history, etc., etc. On the other track, what I perceive, or maybe what I hypothesize, is the awareness which is aware of that inner life of yours.
Yeah.
And those 2 are importantly different. They're related, obviously, but importantly different.
Yeah, and I think that you're absolutely right in pointing that out. I can tell you from my own experience that first I perceive the second of them. I perceive the being which perceives, and then as I get to know a person, I begin to see the various connections in their life.
Okay.
I know that the connections are there, but I don't know what they are at first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's a really good observation. That's very useful, actually, in helping to define this for everybody.
That makes sense to me. Okay, that makes sense.
Awesome. Yay. So Dave says, tying back to Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, he asks, is that plausible, an android gaining this inwardness, or do you suppose that it is a property unattainable for a cybernetic organism?
You know, that's a hell of a good question for which I do not have an answer. You know, when I think about it, you know, what is consciousness? What is being? What is self-awareness? Can a computer become self-aware? I think it's possible. The thing that I am worried about is that I'm a little bit concerned that it might be slightly more likely that a self-aware computer might be a psychopath.
That was my thought just now.
Yeah.
I mean, my intuition is that it is potentially possible, but I feel like there may not be the same level of, I guess, empathy. I hate using that word.
Yeah, ability to connect, because a computer will not have the same kinds of experience. But we have no idea.
Yeah.
We really don't. And it's going to be fascinating to see what happens. And, you know, it is possible that what happens will be Skynet. And it is possible that what happens will be something incredibly cool.
Aaron says, mechanical with a capital M. And Nancy says, I'm worried that general artificial intelligence will be produced by sociopathic organizations. And that's a good point too, actually.
It's a very good point. And it's not will be, it are being.
Yeah.
All corporations are psychopathic by definition. They have no conscience. They have no soul. The people within them might, but the corporate structure is designed to do only one thing, which is to survive and thrive in an environment at the expense of everything else.
And that's not even necessarily a value judgment. That's just, you know,
Yeah,
the
that's the way it
functioning
goes.
of it. Yeah.
Yeah, remember when your prime directive is to be concerned only with the fiduciary responsibility you have to your shareholders, that is not a good way to develop a conscience.
Yeah, Aaron describes it as make as much money as possible all the time, no matter what.
Yes. So we can assume that corporations are not intelligent, which I'm pretty sure is the case. Yeah, it's like sharks. Sharks do not need to evolve, right? Sharks have not evolved for thousands and thousands and thousands of years because they do their job perfectly. Their job is to eat pretty much everything else. Corporations are the same way. Corporations have no impetus to evolve. They would need to have something imposed upon them from the outside in order to have any form of corporate evolution. And it would have to be something that would kill them if they varied from a particular set of behaviors.
But the profit motive, in a sense, acts as that kind of a pressure. I mean, for example, I've worked fairly closely with companies that are with their IT departments, with the departments that produce software and stuff like that. Now, one of the things that certainly has evolved in a lot of these companies is a way of developing team spirit, teamwork, and if you want, empathy within those teams in the service of making money for the company. But that pressure of making money does produce changes within the corporation, which go towards this empathetic relationship that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think we're talking apples and oranges here. I think that any empathetic relationship between members of the corporation does not filter up to corporate behavior. I see that very rarely. I know people who work for, Google and Apple. I used to work for Apple. Wonderful people used to work there. The corporation itself, its behavior is abhorrent.
Okay, are you talking about corporate
very
behavior
nice people
as behavior towards the outside world?
Yes.
Because certainly, those particular ways of producing generative teams which produce innovative software and so forth are built into those corporate structures. I mean, that's in fact what they're going through is structural reorganization to make that happen. So internal corporate behavior is definitely being affected by that. Maybe not external corporate behavior.
Yeah, and I'm talking external behavior. I'm talking about the way the corporation treats the world.
All right.
And in my experience, even a corporation like Apple has this problem. And like I said, I used to work for Apple. I saw the problem firsthand. And you also have the problem of with Hewlett Packard, which used to be like one of the best places to work in all of Silicon Valley, all of the world. It was rated often #1 or #2 in employee satisfaction. And because of corporate culture, they moved Carly Fiorina into it, and she destroyed that in less than 6 months. And I was actually working as a contractor for HP at the time, and I was horrified by what I saw that person do. So corporations are built in such a way that internal structure can be destroyed in the name of profit just as easily as it can be fostered.
Then so are human beings, right? You can drive a human being nuts as well as a corporation nuts, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nancy says, some companies produce decent products. Others are as scammy as they can get away with. I believe corporate culture matters.
Oh, of course it matters. And even if they produce good product, it doesn't mean that the corporation is not an asshole. Amazon produces great product, but they treat people badly, especially within their corporate structure. And if you look at Bezos, I mean, Bezos is for sure a psychopath. There is no doubt about that. Psychopaths do not have to be axe murderers. They can go through life and never commit a crime. They just do not have that ability to connect with the other as inwardness. They view the people around them as object. And that doesn't even mean that Bezos isn't a nice guy. By all accounts, he seems to be a pretty decent psychopath. But I wouldn't want to work for him, not for any amount of money, and especially not on the lines that are shipping stuff out. I hear people typing.
It's typing there. Nancy says, if you perceive inwardness, are you better at recognizing psychopaths?
No.
I would say no, yeah.
No. You might even be worse. I got better at recognizing psychopaths because I spent a lot of time locked in a building with a whole bunch of them. And I can tell you that I'm nowhere near 100% at spotting them. My housemate got involved with a woman who was a psychopath, is a psychopath. And it took me almost 3 months to figure it out, of seeing little things in her behavior. She was very good at it. But when it all came to a head, she definitely showed her true colors. And yeah, that was an interesting experience.
She adds, sometimes I wonder whether people are built to be lied to.
Well, we start by lying to ourselves, which makes it easier for other people to lie to us. I'm pretty sure that the less you lie to yourself, the less other people can lie to you successfully.
Yeah. At least I feel some ring of truth to that. Yeah.
All right, we're kind of winding down to the end of this. So I'm sorry, folks, but it's time for the commercials. But we got to do the commercials because we got to convince you guys, or convince you to convince your friends or something to buy stuff from us so that we can keep doing this. So, important things. One, next Saturday, the Way of the Nomad starts. I'm very excited about this.
Yep.
If you haven't signed up for this course, why not? This is an incredibly cool course. This is going to be like, this is going to be the flagship course of what I do.
So 9 weeks?
9 weeks for a mere $100. And yeah, my expectation is that it is going to give you guys material, none of which is actually new, but arranged in a way that makes it more useful and true to the stated goals, which is health, longevity, and abundant energy.
In a way that's pretty easy to really enact in everyday life. You know, it's not just like, oh, here's this
it's
woo
like
thing that may or may not
Yeah, it's like I have worked very, very hard on figuring out how you can actually do this in the real world. Because anybody can tell you to do a bunch of crazy stuff, and then you can't do it, and then you can go, oh, it would have worked if you did it.
Mm.
Yeah, so this is not that. This is, you can actually do this. You don't have to eat like a 1,000-year ago steppes nomad from Central Asia, but you can understand why their diet worked as well as it did. And you can understand, especially because this was right when the nomadic people and the settled people were starting to intermingle more, and the diets were changing just a little bit, that you can adapt to pretty much anything. The physical exercise part of it is simple. It's easy. It is, it's nothing that a person with moderately good health will not be able to do. We can make it more complicated for those of you who are advanced, but we're going to start with something that everybody can do. And, the meditative techniques, the breathing techniques, all of that, it's not going to take all your time. You're not going to have to devote 6 hours a day to this. As a matter of fact, following the 4th precept of the teachers, you do this in your everyday life. You don't take time out to do it. You make it a part of what you do so that it doesn't steal your time.
Yep, that's the important part. I feel like that's really valuable. And it makes it so much simpler. It just becomes a lifestyle in the sense of, just a few simple things that make big changes. Yeah.
Yep. So that's happening, and it's happening next week. And trust me, you really want to be there.
Yeah, definitely. And Ilmar asks, and where does one sign up for this course? We'll be putting the link in the description, and we definitely posted it on the forum, but we can always post it again. And
if you go to the forum, it's right up on the top.
Yep.
And soon, actually probably by the end of this coming up week, we will have the 3 forces and 6 processes available for download for a very small price. So tell your friends who didn't get to experience that course that they really want to do it. And for those of you who were in that course, you get all of the extra material that we're putting together for free, just because you were there and we like you.
Yep.
And that will also be true for the Enneagram of the Chief Feature course, which will be probably released the week after we release the first one.
Mm-hmm.
And I still have 2 slots open for people who seriously really want to do the work. You can consult with me privately, one-on-one, individual stuff, which is great fun and is the fastest way I know of to get this stuff going.
So what's that package?
That's the package is you can try this out for 6 weeks at half price.
So that would be
instead of $600, because my basic fees for individual consultation is $100 an hour, it would be $300. And some people like it.
It's worth it. It's definitely worth it.
And I'm still begging Kyle to start taking on people too. She is almost ready to do it. I think the Australian trip is going to be her coming out party.
My debut.
Your debut, yes.
Oh God. All right, cool.
Yeah.
Let's make that happen too.
We are going to make that happen. So that's what we got. And like I said, like us on YouTube, subscribe to the channel. There will be links there to get to our Instagram account because we put up witty stuff there. Find us on Facebook. Do all of the things. Do all of the social media things, because why not? I mean, you could do this, or you could watch kittens. Kittens, kittens are fun for a while, but we're more amusing.
So I think that's it for commercials.
That's it for commercials.
And yeah.
So we are going to say thank you for putting up with us for an hour or so. And it's always a delight to have you here every Sunday. And I hope to see you all back next week. And so we will end